Some mornings don't feel like mornings at all. The alarm rings, light slips through the curtains, the world begins moving, but your body stays still. You stare at the ceiling, your phone buzzes, messages arrive, responsibilities wait. Yet something inside you whispers, not today, just a little longer. I remember having days like that myself. Nothing was physically wrong, I wasn't sick, I wasn't injured, but the simple act of getting up felt strangely heavy, as if my mind had quietly unplugged from the world. And the worst part isn't the tiredness, it's the guilt that follows. You start asking yourself uncomfortable questions. Am I becoming lazy? Why can everyone else move forward while I feel stuck right here? Psychology has spent decades studying moments like these. Not the dramatic breakdowns, but the quiet ones, the days when motivation fades and stillness takes over. The psychologist Carl Jung once wrote in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." His words suggest something unsettling but powerful. Sometimes the mind slows us down not because we are failing, but because something inside us is trying to be seen. So when someone feels the strange urge to lie down all day, the real question might not be about laziness at all. The deeper question is this: what is the mind quietly trying to protect or reveal when it refuses to move? If you pay close attention, the urge to lie down all day rarely appears out of nowhere. It often shows up after long stretches of emotional noise. Too many tasks, too many messages, too many expectations pulling your attention in different directions. Imagine a normal weekday. Your phone wakes you before your alarm. Emails already wait. Someone needs an answer. Another person needs help. By the time evening arrives, your mind has been switching roles all day. Worker, friend, problem solver, decision maker. Even when your body sits still, your brain keeps running. Psychologists call this cognitive overload. The brain, like any system, has limits. When those limits are pushed for too long, motivation quietly shuts down. The psychologist Herbert A. Simon, who studied decision-making and attention, once wrote in Designing Organizations for an Information-Rich World that a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. In other words, when the mind is flooded with demands, it eventually loses the ability to focus or act. This is when lying down begins to feel strangely comforting. It becomes the brain's simplest way of reducing stimulation. No conversations, no expectations, just stillness. What looks like laziness from the outside can actually be the mind trying to reset itself after running at full speed for too long. But overload alone does not fully explain why the body feels so heavy. Beneath the exhaustion of constant demands, another quieter force is often at work. Emotional fatigue that has been building far longer than we realize. Emotional exhaustion rarely announces itself clearly. It slips into everyday life in subtle ways. You might notice it in the way conversations feel harder than they used to. A friend asks a simple question, and suddenly it feels like effort to respond. At work, even small tasks seem strangely overwhelming. You scroll through your phone, not because you enjoy it, but because doing nothing else feels easier. Many people think tiredness only comes from physical work, but psychology shows that emotions can drain us just as deeply. Daniel Goleman, known for his work on emotional intelligence, wrote in Emotional Intelligence that self-control, the ability to resist impulses, is the basis for will and character. What often goes unnoticed is how much energy this self-control requires. Every time you hide frustration, stay polite when you're upset, or push through stress without expressing it, your emotional resources quietly decrease. Over time, that hidden effort accumulates. Think of someone who spends weeks managing family problems while continuing to work every day, or a student who keeps worrying about their future but never speaks about it. Outwardly, they appear fine. Internally, their emotional battery is slowly draining. When that battery runs low, the body begins to seek rest in the most direct way possible, by withdrawing. Lying down becomes more than rest. It becomes emotional shelter. Yet exhaustion alone still does not explain one puzzling detail. Sometimes the deepest heaviness appears not when life is busiest, but when the mind quietly begins asking a much deeper question about direction and meaning. Emotional exhaustion explains part of the story, but there is another moment many people quietly recognize. It happens when life keeps moving, yet something inside you feels uncertain about where it is all going. You wake up, look at your schedule, and everything is technically normal. Work is there, messages are there, the day has structure, but a strange hesitation appears before you even begin. It's not physical tiredness. It's the feeling that your mind is standing at a crossroads without a clear map. In psychology, motivation is deeply connected to meaning. When the mind cannot clearly see why an effort matters, it begins to slow down. The psychiatrist Viktor E. Frankl wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, "Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how." His observation reveals something powerful about human psychology. Energy is not only about sleep or health, it is about purpose. Think of a student studying for an exam they deeply care about. They can stay awake for hours with surprising focus, but give the same person a task that feels pointless, and suddenly even 10 minutes feels exhausting. When the mind cannot locate a meaningful direction, lying down becomes a temporary escape from that uncertainty. It is as if the brain quietly says, if I cannot see where this path leads, maybe I should pause for a while. But uncertainty about direction is not always the real route. Often beneath that hesitation lies something more protective, the mind's instinct to avoid emotional pain it remembers too well. The human brain is not only built for thinking and planning. At its core, it is built for survival. And survival often means avoiding experiences that once caused emotional pain. If someone has faced repeated disappointment, criticism, or failure, the brain begins forming quiet associations. Effort can become linked with risk. Trying can become linked with the possibility of being hurt again. Over time, the mind learns a subtle strategy. Slow down before stepping into situations that might reopen those wounds. The psychologist Daniel Kahneman described this bias in human thinking in Thinking Fast and Slow, writing, "Losses loom larger than gains." In simple terms, the brain reacts more strongly to the possibility of losing or being hurt than to the possibility of success. Imagine someone who once worked very hard for recognition but was ignored, or someone who opened their heart in a relationship and was deeply rejected. Even years later, the mind may still remember that emotional sting. Without realizing it, the brain may gently guide the person toward inaction. Not trying feels safer than risking another disappointment. This is why lying down can feel strangely peaceful. In stillness, there are no expectations to meet and no new emotional risks to face. But protection has a hidden cost. The same instinct that shields us from pain can also quietly keep us from moving toward growth, and that is where the deeper inner conflict begins to appear. This is where the experience becomes more complicated, because inside most people who want to lie down all day, there is not just one voice, there are two. One voice whispers, "Stay here, rest, don't risk anything today." The other voice quietly pushes back, "You should be doing something. You're wasting time." That inner tension can be exhausting. You may lie there scrolling through your phone, half aware that you want to move, yet unable to gather the energy to start. It's not pure laziness. It's a psychological tug-of-war between the desire for safety and the desire for progress. Psychologists often connect this conflict to avoidance behavior. The mind tries to avoid discomfort, but at the same time, it knows that avoiding too long creates another kind of discomfort, regret. The psychologist Carl Rogers described this struggle in On Becoming a Person, writing, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." Rogers believed that growth does not begin with force or self-criticism. It begins with understanding. Yet many people do the opposite. They shame themselves for feeling stuck. They call themselves lazy, weak, or unmotivated. Ironically, that pressure often deepens the paralysis rather than solving it. Because when the mind feels attacked, even by its own thoughts, it tends to retreat further into safety. But if the conflict between safety and growth continues long enough, something interesting can happen. The stillness itself can begin to reveal what the mind has been trying to say all along. At first, lying down all day may feel like avoidance. But sometimes, if the noise of guilt quiets down for a moment, a different kind of awareness begins to appear. When the mind stops constantly reacting to demands, it finally has space to observe itself. You may start noticing small questions forming. Why have I been pushing so hard? What am I actually afraid of? What do I really want right now? Psychologists have long recognized the importance of this reflective space. The psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott once wrote in Playing and Reality, "It is in playing and only in playing that the individual child or adult is able to be creative and to use the whole personality." Winnicott believed that moments of unstructured stillness allow the mind to reconnect with deeper parts of itself. In modern life, however, we rarely allow that space. The moment we feel unproductive, we rush to fill the silence with distractions, videos, messages, endless scrolling. But when someone stays still long enough, something subtle can happen. The mind begins to reorganize its priorities. Thoughts that once felt overwhelming start to sort themselves out. What once looked like wasted time may slowly turn into a moment of clarity. And that realization leads back to the central tension we began with. Maybe the urge to lie down all day is not only about exhaustion or avoidance, but about the mind quietly asking us to listen. At first, the desire to lie down all day can feel like a personal failure. The world keeps moving, people seem productive, and you wonder why your own energy has quietly disappeared. But psychology suggests a deeper possibility. Sometimes the mind presses pause not because it is weak, but because something inside needs attention. Cognitive overload, emotional exhaustion, uncertainty about meaning, and the instinct to avoid pain can all quietly pull the mind towards stillness. And yet, within that stillness lies a choice. You can treat the moment as proof that something is wrong with you, or you can treat it as a signal worth understanding. When people stop fighting themselves and begin listening more carefully, the heaviness often starts to make sense. The strange urge to lie down all day may not be the end of motivation. Sometimes it is simply the mind asking for the space it needs before it finds a new direction forward.